Shirley, huge congratulations on being the first recipient of BookTrust Lifetime Achievement Award. You've received many plaudits over the years, but how does it feel to be celebrated for your entire body of work?
Well, it feels wonderful. It's a very thrilling award because it is for the whole lifetime of being an illustrator, author illustrator. You know, and so I'm absolutely thrilled.
Can you tell me about some of your books? You're very well known for Alfie and Dogger and Ella's Big Chance, but can you tell us a little bit, sort of from the very short bit from the beginning to end of your sort of journey?
Well, you know, I started off illustrating other people's books, and I did some, did little readers and things like that. But of course, as an illustrator, it's an interpretive role. It's more like acting. If you're as good as the part you get. And the big break for me was called My Naughty Little Sister by Dorothy Edwards. And she saw my work and asked if I'd illustrate her books. Of course, it was thrilling because they're such good stories and they're still around, still being read.
When did you first notice that you had a talent for drawing?
Well, it was about the only thing I was any good at, really. And I left school early, went to Liverpool Art School. I was too young to go away from home, so I went in daily from the Wirral where we lived. And I was interested in costume design for the stage, and so I learned how to make clothes. It was an excellent course. And I was really interested in theatre at that point. Very close to illustrating in a way. And I had a season at summer working as a dog's body at Birmingham Rep. And at that point, I think I decided the theatre wasn't for me, much the relief of the management. I went back to the art school the next term, and then I was firmly into illustration.
Your illustrated books are reassuringly domestic, with stories that focus on the little things that matter a great deal to young children.
Yes.
So, a lost toy, a child locking themselves in the house. Do you think that children's books are best when they reflect the world that children know?
Well, picture books are a huge field now. I think they should reflect everything. They should reflect magic, they should reflect fantasy, anything. And I'm not great on fantasy. I mean, I'm just not. I like drawing real children. I lurk about in parks and play areas with my sketchbook, and I observe how they look when they're a little bit worried about something, how they stand when they're a bit left out by the others or whatever, and then how they all crouch down and look at something, or how they go off like a flock of birds, running off. And if you draw rather than use a camera, I'm no good with a camera at all, you remember, so you go home and make it all up. So that connection really led me to having a real life heroes and heroines rather than fantasy ones.
Can you talk us through your reading experience as a child? I know that you read comics, but any favourite comics, favourite books?
Well, we had the very nice little comics of Tiger Tim and all that. I really liked them. We had Josephine and her dolls, which was even then dated and old-fashioned. We had the William books later on, which I adored. Ishmael Crompton, he was the archetypal naughty boy. But I grew up, as I say, during World War II. And when the Americans hit, they came into the world, Liverpool was awash with GIs, and with them came the American comics, and they were for adults because they had a population of immigrant people who weren't necessarily unintelligent, but just didn't speak English very well. So these were very sophisticated, and I really loved them, and I learned a lot from looking at them. But of course we were lucky, we had all the classics, we had Arthur Rackham and the classic illustrators, Edmund Dulac, all those people I used to look at.
Your characters are always kind and generally good, but they're also quite naughty. What were you like as a young child?
Fairly. I don't think I was a wild naughty. I had a very exciting a middle sister who was the tomboy, and she was always hanging, you know, from a tree, and people were saying, "Oh, don't, it's too dangerous up there." And I wasn't like that at all. No. I sort of plodded around, you know.
Do you think that having that sister enabled you to observe children, even from a very young age?
I don't know what made me observant to want to draw. I just know that I did draw from a very early age. And I had a magazine that I started when I was about 8. It was called it had a serial. There was only one. It was continued in our next, but the next never came out. It was only one edition of this mag. But in it were some school cards called The Reckless Three, spelled WRECKLES, and various stories and puzzles and things like that, sort of emulating the stuff I would like to have read. Yeah.
How did having your own children influence your work?
Well, enormously, of course, but I never drew them, and I'm always being asked, are they the people in your stories? The answer is no, they are not. But I had 3 children now grown up. I've got grandchildren, of course, and but they all had a very clear idea of what they wanted to do. So that my first child who is a journalist, he was, on election day, he was walking up and down outside with a skipping rope handle saying, "Would you like to say a few words about the election?" You know, he was really trying to be a journalist. The second one was a scientist. He was looking at aphids. He was looking at, he was a microbiologist. And guess what? I had a daughter, Clara, and she was the one that drew and went right through drawing, and that was what she liked, and painting. And I never taught her anything, but I did used to leave, when I finished, I used gouache colour, which is, it's a water-based colour, but it's a little bit thicker. You can get it sort of more of an impasto tone, thicker to use. And so I used to always leave the paints in the, when I finished work at the end of the day, and let her use them. It's like leaving the icing in the bowl when you've made the cake.
And you're doing a writing project with your daughter at the
Yes.
moment. Would you like to tell us a
That was terrific fun. Oh, we've had so many laughs. It's so funny. Yeah. Well, it's the first time I've ever had an illustrator. So I'm the author. She's the illustrator. And it's about Dixie O'Day and his friend Percy. I've got a very good model of him over there, which we can show you. And we just had lots of fun doing it. And she's now contributing so much to it, she could almost have written it herself. But in theory, I'm the author, and she is the illustrator. And it's for what I think are called emergent readers, are they, or something? People who are just starting to read to themselves. And you lose a lot of people at that point. They take something that's a bit difficult for them, and everybody who's got children know this, and then they fling it aside. And now, of course, they're off like a flash to watch telly.
In what way do you think books have changed over the years? Things that you love, maybe things you're not so wild about?
Well, there's more of them. The choice is enormous. All I can say is that if they love the same story over and over again, well, read it over and over again. They may not need those many books. They may just have the ones they love. People give them books, and you can tell right away if it's going to be a success. But reading isn't a competition. I keep saying this to people. It isn't. A very small child can derive enormous satisfaction and pleasure long before they go to school. From seeing themselves as readers. Opening the page, opening the book, turning the page, pointing out what's going to happen next. This is what they should be doing at that point. It doesn't matter whether they, how well they read or whatever, that will come much later. But I think if you can give them that experience when they're little, you've probably got them for life.
And do you think that, children's literature in Great Britain is world class, and it's a market that's also growing. But do you think that children's literature gets the profile and the word is respect, but across the piece, do you think it's really held in the right level of esteem?
I think it's being put in the front, in much greater publicity, focus by the great success of the really hard, really big sellers. Well, obviously J.K. Rowling, Chris Riddell, all these people who are selling a lot of books right across the age range. We've got wonderful picture book illustrators, and I think they do get more publicity now. But you see, when I started, it wasn't a very big market, and it was only when it was probably when the Tolkien novels, broke through as huge. Everybody read them, and then there is a book fair in Bologna now, and of course they're selling rights, and it's a huge industry now. It's a very important part of publishing.
What has been your career highlight so far? And it could be an event or it could be a book that you wanted to talk about. Yes.
Oh, my highlights. Well, I think Dogger winning the Greenaway was a highlight. Yes, that was tremendous. Because it's a very kind of typically English. I was told at that point, well, you're all fine, Shirley, but you're typically English. I mean, you won't really be readily understood abroad. I mean, it'll be okay here, but. And of course, Dogger nothing could be more typically English than a jumble sale at an old toy getting lost and turning up on the toy store. And that was the one that broke through.
You've just moved into novel writing away from picture books.
Yeah.
Did you find this challenging, exciting? Is it something that you want to do more of?
Oh yes, I loved doing a novel. I mean, that was thrilling. Just to go back to picture books. I mean, the as it were character I know best is Alfie. Alfie, there are many Alfie books out there, and lots of children write to me about Alfie, and they're rather kind of, sort of feel for him, because he's not that confident, and the thing about that point in that preschool life, it's a serious issue, trying to get your shoes on the right feet, trying to go to a party without your security blanket, trying to do all the things he has to do. I mean, these are really big issues to a little child. And I think because I got Alfie established as a character, that I've been able to go on. He's got a friend, Bernard, who's a bit cool, Somebody said to me the other day, when they're both 16, Bernard's going to get the girl. So Alfie, I'm doing an Alfie book now, and he would be, in real years, he'd be sort of about 33, but of course he's a perennial preschooler. And so I never tackled anything really much older than that. I've always thought of myself as an illustrator for the younger child. And then I came to a point in my life where I really wanted to see if I could write a novel. I set it in Florence, in Italy, during the First World War. I was there myself when I was about 19 with a sketchbook, and it was very run down. And it isn't full of tourists like it is now. It was very run down. It was the aftermath of the war. And I knew a family who'd been, his mother was English, and she'd been called upon by the partisans, who were the anti-fascist freedom fighters, who were in the hills all around Florence. Very dangerous, and they were very frightening too. They were helping escape prisoners of war, Allied prisoners of war, and they were asked to hide them in their cellar, which was very brave, because if you got caught by the Gestapo, you got shot. So that seemed to be a very exciting theme. Set it in Florence, and it's been a success. It's thrilling.
And in the new book, you go to the Second World War.
Again.
Did that bring back all sorts of memories, or did you try and pitch a completely new story in a sort of a world that you knew but built a new one around it?
No, I mean, this latest one is much more, it's the most autobiographical thing I've ever written, because it's set near Liverpool in that awful winter of 1940 to 41, when the city was being relentlessly bombed by Hitler's Luftwaffe, Air Force. And we went in the middle of right in the centre of Liverpool, and they were going for the docks. And it was a very frightening time. But children I talk to who do projects on the Second World War, they all see it as a sort of, they read Here on the Bicycle, they see it as a time of sort of heroism and daring do. But as a civilian, a child at that time, at early teens, as is the heroine of this story, I can assure you it was deadly boring. I mean, you spent hours queuing for food. You couldn't go anywhere on holiday. The seaside was full of barbed wire and gun emplacements. You couldn't buy sweets, they were severely rationed. And worst of all, you couldn't buy nylons. And we had to, we were struggling at that point. I was about 13, 14, trying to go down to the local youth club dance, and you had to put gravy browning on your legs, and you could buy a sort of a liner. You could draw a seam down the back and try and pretend you were wearing stockings. I mean, the struggle to hang on. And there we were, in the middle of the Blitz, going down to the youth club and hoping to be asked to dance with our gravy browning legs. So it was a sort of bizarre combination. I have to say, I have dedicated that book to the merchant navy, because they actually saved us in that war. They were heroic beyond belief. They braved the icy, U-boat infested Atlantic, and we couldn't have survived without them. We were all digging for victory and things, but we couldn't. They kept it going. The losses were enormous. They were badly paid. If you were in the Royal Navy on a destroyer or cruiser or something, you could, if you were attacked by a U-boat, you could fire back, but they didn't have anything to fire back with. They were in convoys, but they were being absolutely, the losses were terrible. And they were heroic, great heroes. So that's why I've dedicated the book to them.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm working on another Alfie book, and another novel, perhaps, one day, but that's sort of in the back of my head at the moment.
Would you ever write for adults?
No. I don't think I ever would.
Is that just
I've got enough to do as it is. This is the first Alfie book I did, when he first came upon the scene, running up the road ahead of his mum, and she's coming trundling behind with Annie Rose in the buggy. And he runs into the house. He's saying, "I've got in first." He goes in and he slams the door. And "Open the door, Alfie," said Mum. But Alfie can't open the door because he can't reach the catch, and the key is, Mum can't open the door because the key is inside. Now this is very much a book, I think, is a wonderful form, you see. But in this I was able to actually use the gutter, which is the thing you always try to sort of flow across. And I made that as part of the story, so that gradually you realise, even the tiniest child, long before reading it, can see how he's going to resolve the problem. And they're ahead of the plot, you see. They're ahead of the text, because of course in the end he manages to open a door as everybody's frantically, the window cleaner, the milkman, Mrs. McNally, Mrs. McNally's Maureen, and so on, are all outside on the doorstep. Alfie opens the door, and they all go inside and have tea together. And that was a marvellous way of using the actual form of a book. And that's where the first Alfie idea came to me. And then, of course, I started opening out to all the kind of worries that this age group have, going to a party without your security blanket, you know, and things like that, getting your shoes on the right feet, etc. But that was the first one. And it's lovely the way children can actually understand a book. I was talking to a publisher, Sebastian Walker, and he said, would you like to do something for very, very young children? Really young. This is the pre-Alfie age. And I came up with these books, and they are very, very simple. I mean, we're talking for really tiny children. And so they're, you know, alliterative, and so it's like bath water's hot, sea water's cold. Ginger's kittens are very young, but Buster's getting old. And they were done as a set. There's one noisy, and when we went to the park, all shapes and sizes, about round and square. And so it covers every concept in a way that a baby can, a tiny child, toddler, can understand. And then I did another book about this same little girl, which is about out there, sort of, you know, the being out and about. And it's seasonal, massive amount of detail, because I think that even tiny children like poring over detail. And it's just out and about, and it starts in the spring and it goes right through about mud. It's very, very tactile. Water, seaside, squirting rainbows, splashy, I like water, the shallow, splashy, paddly kind, the hold on tight, it's deep kind, slosh it out of buckets, spray it all around. I do like water.